two teams create a video game, but no communication between the devs is allowed. Welcome to the branching edition of the Path the Game Challenge. The first developer will create the base prototype, which he will then send to two different devs. They'll each have a few hours to make progress on the project before passing it on to the next creator in their team. This way we end up with two potentially very different games, and at the end of the video I'll ask you guys to let us know in the comments which is your favorite game, and the team which made it will move on to the finals against Team Red, which won in the previous video. So let's get started with the base, which both teams will need to build from.
Hey, I'm Code here. I make devlogs on YouTube. I'm excited to kick off the challenge and to lay the foundation for the other developers. First I did some brainstorming to come up with some ideas. After a while I decided to try and make a minimalist strategy game about green energy. The idea is to construct a small island with machines that generate energy. You can then use the energy to build defenses and fend off enemy ships. First I set up the Unity project and imported some packages like DoTween and post-processing. I then put some simple water, and since the game will have players built on a grid, I wanted to display a simple grid pattern on top of the water. To make the grid pattern I used Unity's line renderer component to draw zigzagging lines on the X and Z axis. At this point I was already more than an hour into the challenge, so I turned to Blender to model some simple machines. With the models ready, I began working on the build system. Luckily I have some experience since I've made a modular build system before. For players to place the platforms and machines I made a UI toolbar with a couple categories to choose from. I also made it so you can easily add new items to the UI and set their category, and it will automatically display them. When you click on one of the buttons it shows a placeholder indicator and you can click again to place. Now that the simple building system is in place, I also added a camera controller. This way players can zoom in and out and also move around the scene. I then used DoTween to add some satisfying animations when you place items or when you try to place in a forbidden spot. The last thing I added is a system that displays your generated energy and shows simple text effects above the machines. Unfortunately, I couldn't add everything that I had in mind, like batteries, defenses and enemy ships. However, I'm still quite happy with what I managed to do in my 6 hours, and I'm quite curious to see where the other developers will take this.
Okay, great. Now I'm going to send this base prototype to the first developers of both Team Green and Purple, and we'll see where they take it. But first, this video is sponsored by Replica Studios. This cutting-edge generative AI voice technology is now readily accessible from within the Unity asset store, so that devs can seamlessly generate and transfer voiceovers directly into the engine. You can type literally anything you like, choose a character, and have them say it, complete with powerful emotions and subtle tweaks to individual words if you so choose.
My family was butchered by Hellspawn. To witness such a thing is enough to leave your mind in ruins.
You can check out Replica using the link in the description.
Hi, I'm Gideon. This is only the second game I've ever worked on. The first one just went into early access, has over 4,000 followers on Steam, and I love working on it while learning. I had a quick look through the project. The build manager was set up that you could add categories and machines, and the UI for each category would be built up from the settings, which was great. I'm not a good artist or 3D modeler, so I plugged in something basic but understandable, and the categories were done. Energy was still magically saved up, and components didn't cost anything. We needed cash. I added some scripts. You can only sell generated energy for cash if you have a distributor that can handle it at the time. If production is high due to wind or sunshine, energy can be stored in batteries, or it goes to waste if there's no storage capacity. Idle distributors can in turn pull energy from batteries to sell that for cash. With my final few minutes, I added a cost label to all components and made the blades turn faster when it's windier. I think I've brought in some good interplay between factors, opportunity cost and variability. And we still have a green energy platform that you have to defend against something.
The first thing that I thought I'd do is make some of the defenses for the game. So I made this laser tower, which shoots these bolts of sort of laser out of them. Then I removed the outline because it looked kind of cheap and decided to add my own edge detection shader, which was like a full screen effect and it looks kind of cool. I also did some more full screen effects like the ripples and caustics that you can see here, which are like simulate light and all that. And I also added some of the enemies. The first enemy that I added was a boat with a cannon on, and that was it. So yeah, it was fun.
As we can see, the game's are already shifting in slightly different directions, and remember that at the end of the video you'll have to vote in the comments on which team you think made the best game.
Hello, I'm Andrew. After playing around with the project and looking through the existing code, I was really impressed with how much was already done. There were some clear hooks into the direction of the game, spend money to build up your platforms, and generate power using solar and wind energy. There are already some dynamics between the generation rate and the cell rate, and it's already working pretty well, but doesn't require much input from the player once it's set up. At this point, judging from the defense button on the interface, it'd make the most sense to develop some enemies. And that sounds great and all, but I wanted to do something different and focus on the base building and the established dynamic between generating, storing, and selling energy. Initially, I thought of filling energy orders from nearby areas. There may be boats floating by that you could click on, but that seemed a bit odd. I eventually settled on the idea of directly connecting power generators to storage. Depending upon the varying generation rates, the player could then attach and detach different power generators to different storage. After my big feature addition, I did a round of polish changes and fixes. I added a shift modifier when placing objects to make the placement go a bit quicker, and I also added this little sound effect for when a platform is placed in the water. At this point, I still had some extra time, so I reworked the UI to free up some of the central screen space. I focused on using more icons and tooltips to reduce the amount of text on screen. It's not the prettiest interface in the world, but there was just way too much blue going on, so it's a step in a different direction.
Hey guys, I'm Dominic from AwakenStudios, and me and my brother run the Awaken YouTube channel.
So I played the game for a bit, and my first thoughts were that this is the start of a tower defense like game. And I'm not a huge fan of tower defense games, so let's just... I'm joking obviously. I actually really like everything the previous developer had done, and I had a few ideas of what I can add. So currently the game feels a bit empty and, well, very lonely. So I modeled this lighthouse in Blender and I textured it with this gradient color palette, and my current thoughts are that the player will need to defend this island. Now, you know how the player is environment friendly because he's building solar stuff and you know, he builds a bond with nature and yeah, turtle, I made a turtle. So yeah, I modeled him with the subdivision modifier, and I textured him with the same gradient color palette because of course I didn't have time to hand paint him. Then I quickly gave him a basic animation and chucked him in the game. I then added these effects, which are actually just squares and circle particles, and then I made him swim forward once spawned, and yeah, he deals damage to all enemies in his path. Then I added health bars to the builds and enemies, I added camera shakes for all impacts, and lastly I made a wave manager and set up 2 waves, with the big boat as an example boss, and yeah, that's all I had time for. Check out my game Elven Battlegrounds and wishlist on Steam if you want.
2 devs from each team have worked on their game. Each is full of potential. Now, if you also want to learn how to create and sell your very own video games, you're in luck because we are launching our mega course, the Game Dev Rocket. But while you're waiting on the Game Dev Rocket to launch, we've made completely free beginner guides to 2D and 3D game development. You'll learn how to create 2 video games, which will warm you up for the full course. Our gifts to the community. The links to the free trainings are in the description.
Sup everyone, I'm AlexRack2. I make videos on YouTube and currently working on a multiplayer FPS with destruction physics. Right off the bat, I noticed we needed some type of tooltips to explain what each building and category does what. I also noticed there was a defense section with no buildings, so I did just that. I created 2 tower types, a minigun and a missile launcher. I felt the theme being more modern and I thought it would be cool to keep it that way. I was only able to get the minigun working in my limited time. Now with defense towers being in, we needed some type of gameplay in order to make them actually useful, so I modeled an enemy boat and gave it a very basic brain: move, shoot, and die. When messing with the post-processing, the water thought it was cute to just flashbang me, so I quickly fixed that. Then added some emission to objects like the platforms and enemy ships. I did notice in the project someone had modeled an HQ, so I finished it and made that the main tower. If that's destroyed, the game would end. Well, I never got to that logic, but you know. I also noticed the sun percentage didn't really do anything, so I altered the day and night system to actually have a visual effect. Ambient and lighting gets darker or brighter depending on the sun percentage. Lastly, I created a wave system that under a certain sun percentage it'll spawn enemies in groups in a far radius, so every night means enemies will come.
Hi there, I'm Hyridas. I work on Have, a single player game where you have to play as 2 characters at the same time. Wishlist Have on Steam now.
Yar!
I have been grinding a lot of tower defense games in the past, so it was very exciting to see that the current project is actually a tower defense game. The first thing that I have noticed was that there were no loose conditions set in place. Enemy ships were simply walking on top of the land, ignoring everything in their path. So I made it that the enemies can shoot at and destroy the lighthouse. Then it was possible to place buildings anywhere, like literally anywhere. You were able to even stack the platforms on top of one another. It felt like a funny feature, but it was way too overpowered, since this allowed you to place a lot of towers on a single square. So I fixed it real quick, and while at it, I have added a zone that allows placement of structures only inside the boundaries. I also made it that the structures display their price, description, and shooting range before choosing what to build. It was impossible to notice where the enemies will come from, so I created a quick effect to visually display the enemy spawn location. Then I added a quick tutorial that explains the game's loop step by step, and now the game only gets started when the player is ready and presses the start button. I also added a few different enemy types, speedboats that are quicker but does less damage and has a lower attack range. And it seems that they had some other intentions rather than attacking the lighthouse at first. Split boats that split into smaller parts whenever they are destroyed. Then I added some new structures to build, shield that helps to protect squishy towers, or at least they should have. Okay, now they do. I also split the laser tower into two types, into a weaker and stronger towers that differentiate between their damage and range, and cost of course. Finally, I tried to squeeze in some other minor stuff such as visual upgrades and gameplay buttons, and there is an endless way by the end where you have to survive for as long as possible, or at least until your PC can keep up. And with that, my time is up.
Okay, only one more dev to go for each team, and then it will be time to vote on the best game.
Hi everyone, my name is Martinas. I'm a game developer from a Lithuanian game studio, Sneakybox. We're currently creating our own roguelike shooter game called Chicken Outs, so if you're a fan of roguelikes, please check it out and leave a wishlist on Steam.
The first thing I did after playing a bit of the game was adding a time control system which allowed me to fast forward through the game, and it was kind of a standard feature for these kinds of building games, so it fit nicely. Then I moved on to the building system. I didn't really like that player had to select the building each time they wanted to place it, so I made the player be able to drag and build multiple buildings at a time. Then I started working on the grid. It was using multiple line renderers and was quite glitchy at some points of the game, so I reworked it to use a tile sprite renderer using a tiling grid texture I made in Photoshop. I also wanted the grid to only show up near the cursor, so I made a shader that faded out the opacity the further it was from it. Then I decided to work on the water shader. To make it have more depth, I added a bit of translucency and put Unity terrain underneath it. I also took a part from another shader that was not used to create these little waves on the surface. I wanted the power generation to be more engaging, so I made these electricity orbs that would spawn from the generators, and player would have to click on them to collect the money. Unfortunately, this change made the distributors and batteries useless, so I modified the distributor building to automatically collect the orbs. The time was running out, so in the last minutes I added a game over screen, tweaked some enemy visuals, added camera bounce and other minor improvements to the game.
Hello everyone, my name is Andre and I have a YouTube channel called Mix and Jam, where I recreate mechanics from popular games using Unity as a way to practice my game development skills. So one of the things I noticed right off the bat is that enemies and units were both using health bars. It would just add way too much information on the screen. In the first warning that your unit is getting weak, I created this particle system that is a simple smoke emission. But then for the second warning, where your unit is really in danger to get destroyed, I created this little spark emission. These states would apply to all units, and also it would apply to the lighthouse. Another detail on the project's interface is that every build unit has a category which it belongs to. And I think that this would add additional clicks every time you wanted to build something new. So I decided to get rid of the categorization so that you reduce the amount of clicks in order to build things. Another thing I noticed is that the game's grid was actually huge. So I decided to do two things: reduce the size of the grid, but also make the camera zoom in with a little bit of less perspective so that we can have this kind of like nice placement and also composition of the screen. As I was doing these adjustments, I noticed that I could improve the game feel of the impact when the enemy hits you or when you hit the enemy by providing more feedback. And of course, I had to keep adding subtle changes that would be very hard to notice, but for me are still important for the general experience. For example, in the UI, I made a lot more animations to make the experience of interacting with the buttons a little bit smoother. And since my time was almost at the limit, I just finished everything up by creating a main menu with a simple logo and of course the ability to start. If you enjoy Unity content in general and you want to see some of my mechanic recreations, you can go ahead and check them out at my YouTube channel, Mix and Jam.
I'm already really liking this. I love the outlines here. Hopefully they're actual bad guys and we're not shooting turtles or something like that. That wouldn't be great. They're little rowboats with cannons on them. Oh, and they attack your structures. That's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, we're still in this. I don't know for how long.
Releases a turtle that... Oh my gosh, we have suicidal turtles? That's not... Are we allowed to do that?
Oh wow, this looks awesome. Now let's put another platform and another solar panel. How much do I actually need for defense? 50, that's a lot. I don't think I'm actually gonna get to 50 before the boats arrive.
This is so satisfying. Okay, I still need to click on some of them. What the hell is going on?
Okay, now we're going to make a lot of money. Oh wow, this is cool. Probably just get absolutely ridiculous. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. I don't think they should allow us to turn up the timescale.
Let us know in the comments whether you prefer the game from Team Green or Team Purple. And the team which gets the most votes will move on to the finals against Team Red. Remember that if you also want to learn how to make video games, you can check out our free trainings that are linked in the description, as well as the Game Dev Rockets course. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, and stay tuned for some absolutely wild game dev collaborations.